But I think the number one thing that you can do if you really want to make your goals a reality, stick with your habits, create new habits in the new year, is really to come at everything you want with more.
Welcome back to the Sales Problem Podcast, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 9. And this is the Habits episode. So if you as a listener want to integrate high-performance habits into your life, then stay tuned because we have an amazing episode planned and an amazing guest on the podcast today. I'm your host, Daniel Burns, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, the high-performing, the highly likable, and I'm feeling really nice today, so I'm even going to add highly lovable Steve Comerford.
Wow. I don't know where to go with that one, Dan, but thank you. Thanks for that one. It's a brand new year. I'm trying to figure out how to get on the right track. So I think this episode might help me out as well as our listeners on what to how to get yourself set up for a successful year. So I'm looking forward to it. And
Good.
Well, hold on a second. So, aren't you going to ask me what I have in my coffee mug?
What are you drinking,
podcast.
Steve? Can we do a virtual cheers too?
Okay, cheers.
There we go.
I got a Crank Brothers Crank It Up. So again, to kick off the new year and get it going in the right direction, I did a little crank it up. And do you know why? Because it has bold character, just like you, not like me, just like you. A little chocolate because I'm sweet, and I just like it. I really like it. How about you? What's up with you?
I think it's a love fest on the podcast so far today. We're being way too nice to each other, Steve, but
yeah,
I've got Morning Glory from Crank Coffees.
Very nice.
So I figure we may talk about kind of morning routine as part of a habit, and my routine is to wake up to some Morning Glory. Who doesn't want to start the morning in glory? It's a great way to do it. So
nice
we're going to
Yes.
crank up the podcast in 2024. But let's skip all this coffee talk, Steve, and let's get to our guest. Let's crank out this podcast for our listeners. Who did we bring on the podcast today for our guests? Well, you know what we do? We go out into the world and we find the best. We find the experts. We find the thought leaders so that we can bring you key insights into high performance. And today we've done just that. We've got Julie Lowe, who is a best-selling author and certified high-performance coach. Julie uses neuroscience-backed practices, which I'm interested to dig into, and teaches ambitious professionals how to prioritize their mindset, health, and relationships without sacrificing the quality of their work. Julie's expertise has been featured on Good Morning Washington, Huffington Post, Yahoo Life, just to name a few. And her best-selling book, A Few Good Habits, is a Woman's Day magazine book series pick. And I've got it right here. I got it the minute it came out. I think it was the first day it came out. So let's welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast, Julie Lowe. Julie, welcome to the podcast. We're going to kick it straight over to you because we want to get you talking. How you feeling about being on the podcast? And tell our listeners a little bit about yourself as a high-performance coach.
Oh, well, I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, Daniel messaged me like right after the book dropped on the launch day and said he grabbed a copy. So that was amazing. But I'm so excited to be here. I mean, one thing that I think people should probably know about me and my approach is it may be a little bit different than most people when they're talking about high performance. It may be a little counterintuitive. And like I said, a little different approach than a lot of people come at it when they're thinking about high performance. And I think a lot of times if you ask somebody, well, what do you think of when you think of high performance? They really think about, pushing things to the max and really excelling in a big way and kind of doing it no matter what and at all cost. And really my kind of path to this high performance coaching was a little different. I'm somebody that I think he's always been a high achiever, is that like teacher's pet, straight A student, and was always up to, things in school and in my career and had big ambitions. But the way I got into high performance coaching was actually because I was looking for ways to reduce stress and anxiety. Because I was really doing things in a way that was, I was achieving a lot. I was very successful, but at the expense of my health, my relationships, and really got to the point of burnout. So my approach to high performance is like, how can we be successful, but not burn ourselves out, not get to the point where we're wrecking our health and our relationships. So that's really how I come about things.
I love that. I've been in that end of the pool as well, where there's lots of success, but lots of stress. So I like that you are taking that approach that you can achieve a lot, but if you do it at your own expense, then it comes at a really high cost. And how much is that performance really worth if it really costs you everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we're successful, but we're doing it at the expense of everything else, we're not really a high performer. We're a high achiever, but I don't think we can call ourselves high performers if we're wrecking the rest of our life in the process.
Well, Julie, very nice to meet you. And I'm going to be a bit selfish here because I'm looking for better performance, and I think our listeners are looking for better performance. I struggle with trying to get into the gym, and now, especially in January, it is packed. Everybody wants to do better. I read about a post you had in that, Quitters Friday, or the January 12th, everybody kind of gives up on the resolutions. If you could give our listeners and me one piece of advice to say how they could change their behaviors, their habits in the next 3 months that could help them with their performance, get better performance, what would it be? What was that one thing that you could pass along to them?
Yeah, like you said, the good news is the gym's going to start thinning out because about 80% of people have given up on their resolutions by the second Friday in January. So good news, and it's going to get less crowded. Bad news if you're starting to give up on your own resolutions. But I think the number one thing that you can do if you really want to make your goals a reality, stick with your habits, create new habits in the new year, is really to come at everything you want with more intention. I think the intention piece is what most people are missing. And it's something that it's easy to hear and be like, okay, that sounds nice, but what does that mean? I think the problem that a lot of people have is they say they want something, but then they don't create a plan to get it. Apparently only 3% of people actually write down their goals ever. So I think, if you don't want it bad enough to write it down, you're probably not going to want it bad enough to take action on it. And I think for a lot of us, we're just kind of hoping and wishing that we make things happen, but we're not bringing the intentional planning to it. We're just winging it and hoping it's going to work out. And then the other thing is we're not really bringing the right energy to it. So I think a lot of us are just kind of going through the motions. We're a little bit like robots or zombies, and we're just kind of going through the motion and hoping things will work out. So one thing that was a big epiphany for me a few years ago is I realized it was very intentional with my career. It was very intentional with my business. I had plans, I had goals I wanted to reach, and I knew what actions I was going to take to get there. But when it came to my personal life, I wasn't nearly as intentional. I would say, I want to lose weight. I want to get into shape. I want to be a better mom. I want to be a better wife. And then that would be about the end of it, right? That would be the extent of it. I'd say I wish that I could do these things, but I didn't necessarily have that intentional planning and the focus in my personal life that I had in my professional life. It was actually really incongruent, whenever I realized like, oh, I would never set a goal in my business and then not have a plan to get there. I would never just say, I hope it works out and wing it. I hope I get some sales this week. I would have a plan. And so I think having that intentional planning and intentional focus with how we're spending our time and our energy. So back to the relationship piece, we just say, I hope I'm a better mom this year, and then have, no intention there in how I'm showing up. I think sometimes it's really easy when we're busy people and we're stressed to not show up as our best selves because we're tired and there's a lot going on. So having that really intentional focus in how we spend our time and how we're showing up with the people that are important to us, I think that's a game changer that we can take for granted.
It brings back some memories, Dan, of some other interviews we've had about winging it and how that turns out. And in terms of showing up and having those intentions, I'm curious in your maybe previous years or back a few years, was there one particular habit that was really a game changer? You mentioned a few things in there, what you just said, but is there one that really, really stands out?
Yeah, I would say one that has made the biggest difference for me, and I can really notice it when I'm not good about it, is getting regular exercise. And I think that's something that we hear a lot, but we don't always realize the trickle down effect that it has. So exercise is the number one thing you can do to reduce stress. And so it's definitely something I've noticed that if I'm not regularly exercising, my stress levels, my anxiety levels really go up. And then also, I don't feel like I'm as sharp in my work if I'm not getting that regular exercise. You actually learn better after exercising. Your brain state changes. So you're more focused, you have better concentration, and you're going to be more productive as a result. So exercise is one of those things, they call it a keystone habit because it has these amazing benefits in all areas of your life. And so I think like getting that regular exercise and moving throughout the day, because I think a lot of us have desk jobs and maybe you're getting your morning workout, but then you're sitting at a desk for 8 hours, 10 hours, maybe even longer if then you move to the couch and you watch some TV in the evening. And so I think we might even be getting our workouts in, but then we're so sedentary in the rest of our lives that we're really feeling it. And I think it's really easy to check out and to lose our focus if we're at our desk all day and we're not getting up. And I think it's something we have to be really intentional about. And I certainly feel it when I slack off on my habit there.
Well, talking about intentions and finding the time, what's your advice to people in terms of finding that time? Because one, the gyms are booked, and maybe I'm not a gym person. And then two, where do you find it? Everybody's busy schedule. Like where can you help out people on that one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think sometimes it's about better managing that schedule because we have a lot more time that we can free up than we realize if we're actually more focused and intentional with our time. The other thing is, I think we can start small and make it easy. I think that's really important. Sometimes we think like it's all or nothing. Either I go to the gym and I work out for an hour and it's like super intense and I got to do it 5 days a week. And it's like, we think sometimes it's got to be this like huge time consuming thing. But there's actually a lot of research that even just 2 minutes of intense exercise per day can have huge lasting health benefits. So we're talking about longer and healthier lives just from 2 minutes a day. So I call them exercise snacks. So they're like bite-sized workouts. So we think it's going to be this like huge, multi-course meal of a workout is going to be hours long. But if your goal is to reduce stress, to make yourself healthier, to, get your cardiovascular health up so you can live a longer, healthier life, it doesn't have to be complicated. So you can actually work those little short bursts of intense activity into your day. So again, I would rather you do 2 minutes a day than nothing because you're like, the gym's full. I'm just not going to make it happen. So I think, spare change adds up. Every little bit counts. So I think something is better than nothing, and fitting it in where you can, I think can make a huge difference and make it way easier.
Julie, I'm so glad you came on the podcast, and I knew it was going to be good, but already just in this, first 10 minutes. There's so much that I want to kind of pick out for listeners. And we talk about, Steve, that was a great question about finding the time, because everybody's scheduled with so many important things. And we've got all these Zoom meetings now that, kind of get blocked into our calendar. And there was a concept I learned about, they called it time confetti. And it's little bits of time that are through our schedule. And because we've only got 20 minutes, we think, I'm not really going to be able to go to the gym or do anything effective. So I love that idea of, if you know that you've got a short block, then use that versus, doing nothing at all. So I think that's great. The other part about planning, I'm really big on this year for 2024. And as a coach, that's what I want to work with people on, is their growth plan, because I think you nailed it. I think that intention of having a written plan is a game changer. So love that you've dropped all that right into the first part of our podcast. So I'm going to transition over to your book, A Few Good Habits. And right away, I love the title, because my favorite movie is A Few Good Men. And it's famous for the classic line, I want the truth. And then you can't handle the truth. What is the truth, Julie, for our listeners about most habits that they just won't be able to handle?
I think that the biggest thing, and where people sometimes want to stop listening to me, is when I say that I think we're making things way too complicated. And a lot of the advice I give, and I know you know this, Daniel, because you've read the book, it's common sense advice. I'm not saying anything in here that you'll be like, oh my God, that's brand new information. I've never heard anybody say that before. Most of it is common sense advice, but I think common sense is not always common practice. So, I've talked about exercise. Most people will roll their eyes and go like, yeah, I know. Yeah. I know that. Like, I know I should work out more regularly. I know it's good for my health. And maybe they even know it's good for their brain and can make them more productive, but they blow it off. And I think it's because we live in an age where we want the new shiny thing. And we think it takes a fancy app, and we need, the perfect meal plan or whatever it is. And we're making it too complicated. And I think most people could find such a huge improvement in their overall quality of life and their odds of actually hitting their goals and sticking with their habits if they would just go back to the basics and just go back to common sense practices and healthy habits that are just going to kind of rise the tide and make us better in all areas of our lives. But most people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that they need to sleep more or exercise more. They're like, yeah, and like give me the good stuff, like give me the fancy secret. And the hard truth is, it's not that complicated. We're just not doing the things that we know we should do. We know what to do. We're just not doing it.
So you mean I shouldn't be cold plunging while fasting and also meditating all at the same time, and then get out of that and have my skinny popcorn to make sure that that's not the answer. It's actually much simpler than that, is it?
Yeah, believe it or not. I mean, like, we like the diet fads and the fancy workout equipment and stuff. And I'm like, work out for 2 minutes, like get your heart pumping, like keep it simple. Like, and I think, we say we want it to be easy and simple, but then we're always looking for that new shiny object and trying to do too much. I mean, to your point there, like we're like, it's New Year's and I'm going to fast and I'm going to clean up my diet and I'm going to work out every day and I'm going to start a new business. I'm going to find a new relationship by the end of February. Like, it's like we try to do too much and then we can only maintain it for so long. And that's why the second Friday in January is Quitter's Day, because we're like, screw it. Like, I can't do it all. And if I can't do it all, I'm not going to do anything. And then it's also like, I worked out for a week. Why haven't I dropped 20 pounds, right? So we expect it. We want it now and we want it fast. And so I think there's just so much going on there that sets us up for failure, honestly.
I couldn't agree more. I call it reverse momentum. People go from the couch to being like a world-class athlete's routine.
Yeah.
And it's run before they've even started to walk. And I think that is a big source of failure. Julie, for our listeners who are business people, who are entrepreneurs, who are coaches, salespeople, what's the habit for them that you think will lead to growth in their business and on that side of the habit equation?
Well, I think the thing that's really underappreciated, and I know you're a sales podcast, so I'm gonna really sell this one hard. I'm gonna set it up big. Okay. So what if I told you there's this, we'll call it a miracle cure that researchers have found that's going to help you improve your memory, improve your concentration. It's going to strengthen your immune system. It's free. There's no side effects. And it can even reduce your risk of dying in an accident. Does that sound like something that would maybe be valuable to people? Have I sold you on it?
Where do I sign up? Where do I sign up?
So for most people, all you have to do is get an extra 60 to 90 minutes of sleep at night. So about 7 to 8 hours of sleep, because most people are getting closer to 6. Now, again, this is one of those things where people might want to turn off the speaker right now. It sounds so simple, but I think, again, it's something that we really underestimate. It can be a game changer, because if you are sleep deprived, if you stay up till midnight tonight, and then you got to get up at 6 a.m. tomorrow to get the kids off to school, to get to work, you might as well go into work drunk. And I'm not just saying that like figuratively. I mean, like, researchers have studied this, and your cognitive impairment is equivalent to having a couple of beers before you go to work if you have not gotten enough sleep. And so I think it's just something that can be a real game changer. But again, it seems so simple, and we take it for granted.
I love the focus on the basics, because it's so important. Things like sleep, like just getting water, good, nutritious food, and breathing oxygen. Like, we skip past the necessities that keep us alive and keep us functioning. We actually, really kind of minimize those things a lot of the time without even thinking about it. Yeah. So, Julie, you work with high performers, and if somebody doesn't see themselves as a high performer, and I've met a lot of people who they do very well, but they don't want to call themselves a high performer. They don't want to identify with, I'm an achiever. That makes them feel either a little uncomfortable, or maybe they're going to stand out and they don't want that kind of label. How do you help somebody that doesn't quite see themselves in that light still create the habits and performance to keep growing?
I think that's a great question, because if we don't identify with being a certain way, then it can really be hard to go after that. And I think a mistake I see sometimes is people will say, well, do like positive affirmations. Tell yourself, like, I'm a high performer. I made $1 million this month or something. And the problem is, our subconscious is really good at detecting lies and calling BS on something. So if we just try to like trick ourselves into believing we are something that we don't really believe we are, that's going to backfire on us. Because there's going to be that, they call it cognitive dissonance, right? We're not going to believe it. Mm-hmm. So I think we can't just lie to ourselves about it, number one. But number two, I think a really good way to get around this is to ask yourself, well, what would a high performer do here? What would a high performer do to be a better salesperson? What would a high performer do to close more sales, or to lose weight, or, get in the best shape of their lives? The thing is, we're not lacking information. We can Google just about anything. We can find the information. So you can go in search of it, or think of somebody that's super successful. So if you don't identify as a great salesperson, well, look to Daniel or Steve. Like, what would Daniel do? Right? What would a person that has got what I want, what would they do? So I think that can be really helpful. And I think the other thing is, set yourself up for success. I think sometimes, we talked about some of the mistakes of going too big, going from like, well, I didn't make any money last year to this year, I'm going to make $1 million. Like we set ourselves up to play these games that we cannot win. So why not create a game that you can win? The easiest game to win is a game where you create the rules, right? So create a game that you can win. And we can't always control our outcomes, but if we create a game with rules that are around actions that we can control, we're going to set ourselves up for success. So I can't control how many people ultimately buy from me in my business, but what I can control are the actions that I can take that should lead to the outcome I want. So again, I can't guarantee I'll make $1 million this year, but what I can guarantee is I'm going to outreach to 5 people every day. I'm going to email my list once a week. I'm going to take these actions, and that's the game I'm playing. So create a game that you can win instead of setting yourself up for failure. And, we love to see proof. We love to see results. Our brain craves, safety and proof that we're doing something and we're winning. So I think if you don't yet identify as a high performer, set up a game that you can win, that you can control, get that proof that you're winning. And then I think it's going to help change that identity where you can actually identify as being a high performer.
Oh, I love the fact that we're just talking about working on something without the proof. I think that is so hard for people to continue to make deposits into something and give to something without knowing, am I going to get the big payoff? And is this all worth it? And I don't know. So should I quit or do I keep going? And I think that's a differentiator between high performers is they're willing to keep going without knowing or having the certainty that this is actually going to pay off the way they want it to.
Yeah. I think, anything that we apply time to is going to get better. I think it just becomes a matter of math. Like if I want to get healthier, if I work out enough this year, I know that I've got to get healthier. I know that if I spend time meal planning and creating healthy meals for myself, I put that time in, I've got to get healthier. There's science there, right? I know that if I put the time in outreach for sales, I've got to get better at it, right? If I put time into learning how to improve my sales skills, I'm going to get better. It's going to happen, right? So like just find those things that you can do, and the winning, like hitting your goal, is completing those actions. It's not necessarily the outcome. But the outcome, it'll get you there eventually. It's just, again, it all comes down to math.
I want to dig in a little deeper on this one, Julie. I hope I don't throw it off too much of an angle. But I'm curious on this high performer, the person that feels that they are, but they truly are not kind of achieving the goals that they want. And then they just hit the repeat button for the next phase, the next year, whatever, the next campaign that they have. And they're still not really looking in the mirror and seeing exactly what they need to change or what they need to do. But I want to take it from the angle of the manager or the coach of that individual. Like what's the advice to the coach to really dial into that person and help them see things differently or help them get to that next level? What would you say there?
Well, I think you hit on it in your question, is that sometimes we're not learning from what we're doing. We're just doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So I think having more checkpoints for yourself and taking notes on what works and what doesn't, and having time to review. So instead of just barreling through and keep doing the same things over and over again, actually have those checkpoints so that you can feedback, adjust, and be taking notes on what did you like about the process? What really sucked and you never want to do that again? Like what worked and what was a colossal failure? And I think we should do that for our personal goals and our business goals, because if we just keep blindly going forward without learning from anything we're doing, we're never going to get better. So I think with anything, like having those checkpoints, I think when you set a goal, set a big ambitious goal, but then break it down, have big goals with smaller checkpoints. And, so you can feedback adjust. There's a concept in aviation where if you're off by just like 1 degree, you end up being like 60 miles from where you intended to land or something, right? So it's like these small errors can really throw us off course. So if you are, having these checkpoints, you're seeing your progress and you're keeping your eye on the end goal with checkpoints, I think it's easier to catch when you're off and adjust. If I set a goal to read 50 books this year and then I don't track my progress, and then it gets to November and I'm like, oh my God, I've read 20 books. I have to read 30 books in a month, or if you have a sales goal and you don't wait until the end of the quarter to check in on how you're doing, you're going to be scrambling. So I think like have those checkpoints so you can feedback adjust and take the notes, even if it's something like exercise. Take the notes so you can learn from them and start creating almost like your own personal user's manual. How does Steve thrive? Under what conditions do you do the best? And write that stuff down so you can actually learn from it. And I think a coach can help with that. Like to your point about the coach, like I think that's the kind of the thing a coach should be doing for you. Yeah. Or if you're a manager or a leader, you should be noticing those things and holding people accountable and having those check-ins. But I think it's also something we should do for ourselves.
Thank you for that. And I'll take it now to a different point or a level, right? You've got this high performer, or you are a high performer, but you're a perfectionist. Like you will do everything right to the T, and that's the way you do it. And if you don't do that, then you back up, right? Mm-hmm. And again, that gets back to your point around, I think you said earlier, around burnout or, being highly stressed and living at that pace. Is there something there that you coach to or you advise your clients on how to manage that or how to deal with that perfectionist trait or habit?
Yeah, I used to call myself a perfectionist, and I would say it like with pride, like it was like some like quality of work. But I think actually perfectionism ends up being almost like a coping mechanism or some sort of form of self-protection, and we can hide behind it. And I think honestly, like nothing's ever going to be perfect, and we're never going to be perfect. So again, we're setting ourselves up for failure. We're playing a game we can't win. And so I think rather than being like all or nothing, either I'm changing my whole life this month or forget it, I'm not doing anything. Like I think we have to find a middle ground. And I think sometimes, one of the best ways to start out is to start small and to have some sort of minimally viable option, right? Or to have a floor and a ceiling. That's another way sometimes, we'll talk about goals is like, what's the minimum I'm going to do and what's the maximum? And you can look at this in a couple of ways. So if there's something that you're trying to create or, a new habit or something you want to do, again, back to exercise, because that's an easy one. Okay, I'm going to work out at least twice every week. That's my minimum. That's my floor. My ceiling is, I'm going to work, would be working out 7 days a week or something. That's kind of my max. Or maybe you even look at it and go like, wow, actually, if I work out too much, I'm going to hurt myself, right? There's such a thing as recovery days. It's possible to do anything too much. Or it could be like a floor and a ceiling for a habit you're trying to get rid of. It's a bad habit. It's like, wow, I'm on social media too much. I get lost in that 20 minutes before the Zoom call. All I do is scroll on Facebook instead of actually doing something productive. Okay, well, I'm going to reduce that. Well, okay, I need to check my email or my social media or whatever because that's part of my business. So I'm going to check it at least once or twice a day, but I'm never going to check it more than 5 times a day, or I'm never going to spend more than 20 minutes a day on it. So I think sometimes, we can look at these things and kind of say like, okay, rather than it being an all or nothing proposition, can I have minimums and maximums? And then also, to one of my first points I made here is that something is better than nothing and it all adds up. So if you have, that 2-minute exercise and you're like, 2 minutes, Julie, that's ridiculous. That's like, it's like 14 minutes a week. That's crazy. it adds up at the end of the year. Do the math. I don't know how many minutes of working out that would be, but it'd be quite a few hours, I think, by the end of the year. And that is something better than nothing. So I think, again, I just think we set ourselves up in a losing game if it's got to be an all or nothing, full out, full throttle or nothing proposition. So change the rules of the game, find a better game, and it all adds up.
I do like your point around the 2 minutes. I can do that. I can find 2 minutes. That's easy. I'd like to tie in on your habits, and if you're through Instagram or if you see things posted online or you see videos on YouTube, and there's always something trendy or a TikTok, and there's the trendy habit, or what are you seeing out there that you tell people, don't do that, stop, don't listen to that, it's not going to work? What would you advise people on there?
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, is because I kept seeing this like completely ridiculous advice on, Instagram or TikTok or something, where I'm like, oh my God, number one, there's no science behind it. I'm a big nerd. I studied with a neuroscientist. Anything I share, I try to make sure it's backed by science and not just my opinion. So yeah, there's a lot of bad advice out there, and a lot of really extreme advice where, even like, for example, cold plunges, there's a lot of science behind that can work really well. But if that is too extreme for you, and especially if you're actually already really stressed out or a very anxious person, you could actually do some harm to yourself because it might be too taxing on your system. So I think rather than, again, finding this advice that just may not suit you, you need to find things that work for you. And I think something that people are doing that is just not helpful is there's a lot of talk about using willpower and grit to get things done. I think that's actually really problematic because, number one, we can't just grit our way through everything. And motivation and willpower are limited resources. That, again, New Year's resolutions, that's why a lot of them don't work out. Our willpower can only take us so far. And so I think we're sometimes using the wrong fuel. So if you're relying on willpower and grit and determination and then beating yourself up because, like, oh my God, well, why can't I work out every day? Why can't I do this thing? Again, it's a losing proposition. So just, I think, finding a better fuel and finding better ways to get things done. Back to planning. We talked about being intentional about your planning. You're actually like 10 times more likely to hit your goal if you have a really basic plan. So rather than trying to just grit your way through and hope it works out, if you have a simple plan of like, I'm going to do this thing at this time in this place, and this is how long I'm going to do it, like something that simple, they call it an implementation intention. There's been research on it. If you have that simple plan, you're way more likely to accomplish your goal versus just relying on willpower, grit, motivation, and hoping that you can outlast the temptations that are going to come up and the stresses that are going to throw you off track. So that's what I would avoid is those like just motivational speeches that make you think you can grit your way through.
But Julie, we all want to be David Goggins. We all want to go out and run 100 miles a day on broken feet, even though we haven't finished a 5K yet. But I think the goal is ultra marathon from day one. And I love everything you're saying because I see it so often, and that social media trend is really pushing people that way is, build the master bedroom and, the ensuite bathroom before you've laid any of the foundational stuff. Like it just doesn't work that way. And you'd never build a home without a plan.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to know what it looks like, and it's gonna be a written plan. You're gonna be able to visualize it. Then you're even gonna go deeper into technicals. You're gonna have plumbing and electricity. Like, we plan all the other things that are important to us, and we write them down, and we make sure if we're investing money into it that we have a firm plan that makes sense to us. Then we switch over to our goals. and we go, yeah, you know what? Just throw my running shoes on and out the door and think we're gonna find success. So I want to ask you: is there anything we didn't ask you, Julie, that we should have asked you today?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. I mean, I think really what it all kind of boils down to, in my mind, if we want to set ourselves up for success, is setting ourselves up to win by having that plan, keeping it simple, not overcomplicating things, and not beating ourselves up for any failures we've had in the past when we have just been trying to grit our way through and rely on motivation. Because sometimes the other issue I do see people run into is they think like, well, why would it work out this time? Like I've failed in the past. And I think the problem is you just didn't know how to go about it in the right way. You didn't have a solid system. You didn't have a solid plan, and you were really kind of setting yourself up for failure. So I think if you just take the time to learn, number one, what to focus on, where you're going to get kind of the biggest ROI from your efforts is super helpful. And then number two, like having that plan and stop trying to just wing it and hope that things work out and then beat yourself up when it doesn't.
That is fantastic advice from a fantastic coach. And thank you for everything you've given to our listeners today. Honestly, this has just been chocked full of great stuff. I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't know it was going to be this good. So tell our listeners, Julie, where they can find your book, where they can find you, how do they connect to you as a coach? Because I know once they listen to this and go, okay, I need some help, they're going to want to contact you. Where can they find you?
Awesome. Well, the book is available on Amazon internationally. It's also on Barnes & Noble, or if you're not big into big retailers, you can also find it on bookshop.org that actually supports small bookstores. And then for me, so if you liked what we talked about today, but you could use some more help, I actually have a free guide that I share, and it has the 5 rules for habit creation. So if you want the book, but you don't even want to wait for the book to come and you want to jumpstart on your goals, that is really helpful. So you can go to my website, coachjulielowe.com/rules, and you can get that free guide. And I'll also send the first chapter of my book for free. So if you're not sold yet on the book, you can grab that guide for the 5 rules for habits. And then you can also get the first chapter for free. So that's it at coachjulielowe.com/rules.
Well, this is perfect timing coming into 2024 for our listeners to go get that. So go get it now. Get started on your goals. And before we end the episode, Julie, I could not resist being on this podcast with you with A Few Good Habits, my favorite movie, A Few Good Men, doing a little rant, but at the same time, I may end up editing this out. I don't know. But I just have to say that I eat breakfast 300 yards away from 4,000 Cubans who are trained to kill me. So anyone listening to this podcast, don't think you can come down here for a second, flash this book, and make me nervous. I'm an educated man, Julie, but I cannot speak intelligently for the travel habits of Mr. William P. Santiago. All I know is he was set to leave the podcast at 0600 hours. But is that really what I was called here to answer? Questions about podcast and habits? Please, Steve and Julie, tell me with 2 men that are on trial for their lives that their lawyers haven't pinned their hopes to a phone bill. We live in a world with walls, and those walls needed to be guarded by men with guns. So who's going to do it? You, Steve? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you could possibly fathom, and deep down in places that you don't talk about at parties or on podcasts. You want me on this podcast. You need me on this podcast. There's my rant.
Well done.
I spent way too much time memorizing that, Julie, and watching that movie. Far too many. I should have been working on my habits and not watching that movie so often.
There was a drop the mic moment, Dan.
Hey.
Well, to all of our listeners that have tuned in and listened to that rant all the way through, thank you. Julie, for coming on the podcast. You have helped us solve the sales problem, and you've given our listeners some new knowledge that they need to thrive and succeed. You've helped them grow by enhancing what they know. And our listeners, if you're listening right now, we love you. We tell you every time, keep coming back, keep sharing the episodes. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all of your support. We're going to see you next episode. And until then, keep building the best version of you.